All right, we should be, can everybody hear me okay? All right, I'm seeing some thumbs up, so we will begin our meeting. This is a public meeting for the proposed Village of Hannah City TIF District. Ask those at least here in the room to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The purpose of our meeting tonight is just to inform the public and taxing districts having real property in the redevelopment project area, taxpayers who own property in the redevelopment project area and residents in the area as to the village's possible intent to prepare a redevelopment plan and designate a redevelopment project area and to receive public comment. That redevelopment area is commonly called a TIF. So with us tonight is Mr. Nick Nelson. His firm is helping us put together this TIF, and I'll let him go ahead and explain what the TIF is and how we got to this point, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you. So the village is proposing establishing a TIF district. A TIF is just an economic development tool. It's something that the village can use to try and attract private investment through the use of property tax incentives. So I will state at the outset that it is not a separate taxing body, and it does not cause an increase in taxes. I know that's a common question that residents will have is, will this cause an increase in my tax bill? No. Your tax bill is a function of the value of your property multiplied by the taxing body's tax rate. And so you multiply one times the other, that determines what your tax bill is. It is possible, and I'm not sure, I don't recall with Peoria County if there's a separate TIF line item on your tax bill. That is a possibility. All that means is that a portion of it, basically that means that the value of your property went up, and the tax attributable to that portion that went up, instead of going to the taxing bodies, goes into the village's TIF account, and then that money can be used for TIF eligible project costs. So if there is a separate line item, it's not an additional tax. Your tax bill would be the same regardless of whether you're in a TIF district or not. It just means that a portion of the tax that you pay goes from the taxing bodies into the village's TIF fund. As far as the process to get a TIF established, so the first part is to do this public meeting, just kind of inform the public of what the village's intention is. I'll briefly explain how TIFs are established and the process, and then take any comments or questions that anybody has. So that's the public meeting. After today, there will then be a meeting of the taxing bodies that are affected by this TIF. And when we meet with the taxing bodies, at that point, there will be a draft of the redevelopment plan. The municipality has to prepare a plan that determines the types of projects that they're hoping to attract and the estimated costs that they're expected to expend. And that's just if everything goes right, they can spend up to these limits on these types of projects. The meeting and the purpose for that joint review board meeting, they do get a vote. It's advisory only, and they're not voting on whether they think it's a good idea as a matter of policy. They're voting on whether or not the area is qualified as blighted under the TIF Act, which we'll go through that in a second. And they're voting on whether or not the village is following the necessary statutory process. So once the joint review board is included, there will then be another public, what's called a public hearing. It'll be very similar to this, except that at that point, the public will have had a chance to inspect the plan, review it, and then we'll actually get into the details of the plan and go over that. So once that's happened, then at the next meeting, the village can approve the TIF district and the plan, and then we're off and going. So to have a valid TIF district, the area on the whole has to qualify as blighted. It's not necessarily the dictionary definition of blight, but it can be one of several factors that the fact describes. So that can include what you would think of as blighted, torn, rundown buildings, broken pavement, that kind of thing. Also, it can be the EAVs within the area have either been static or declined in 3 of the last 5 years. If there's not, if the village doesn't have a comprehensive plan to govern the design of the area, that can be one. If there's inadequate utilities run to the sites, those are the most common qualifying characteristics. If there's vacant parcels, those can be included as well. The characteristics are a little bit different. The most common are if the vacant properties flood themselves, or if they continue to flooding within the same watershed because of stormwater runoff. That's a common one. If there's a former mining spoils, that can be another way to qualify vacant land. So, but so long as more than half of the parcels within a TIF district qualify, not every single individual parcel needs to qualify, but more parcels than not need to qualify in order for your TIF to be valid. It does have to be one contiguous area. One reason the TIFs can be pretty big and expansive, and that's the case here, is it's not necessarily the village's plan to include all this old existing residential to have projects there. But if we want to spend money on a street that runs through an old residential neighborhood, that neighborhood has to be in the TIF district. And generally, to be safe, you need 300 feet of area to be contiguous. So that's why the area is fairly large, even though there may not necessarily be projects in a good portion of that. Once the village has made this determination that the area is qualified as blighted, we've gone through the statutory process. They establish the TIF district. How the mechanics of it are: once it's established, the base assessed valuation for all properties within the TIF district is basically set. It's called the base value. As the EAV on those properties goes up, the real estate tax attributable to the difference between what the increase in EAV is and what that base EAV is, that difference, that money, instead of going to the taxing bodies, will go into the village's TIF account, and that money can be used by the village to reimburse private developers for their TIF eligible project costs pursuant to any TIF redevelopment agreement, or the village can use that money for public infrastructure type projects. It does have to be for a cost that's TIF eligible though. So if it's not an eligible cost under the TIF Act, the village can't spend money on it. And it does have to be for a project that's provided for in the TIF plan that's adopted by the village. A TIF district will generally remain in place for 23 years. It can be legislatively extended for an additional 12 years, but that has to be done through Springfield. And generally, in order to get that, you need all the taxing bodies to be on board and approve of that before the state will even allow that. So that is a possibility, but most of the time they go for 23 years. So as far as the private developers, like I said, it's the TIF redevelopment agreement that will control what developers get reimbursed, if anything, and that's something that's separately negotiated. So the project they undertake has to be a project that's provided for in the plan. Beyond that, it's just up to the negotiation between the village and the developer on a project by project basis, if the village wants to provide an incentive, and then what that incentive looks like. So you don't have a right to get money, but if there's a negotiation that happens and the village approves of a redevelopment agreement, that's generally how it's done. So I guess with that, I'll take any questions or comments.
The only other comment I want to make here is, and you can see the map. I know it's kind of hard to see up there, but the map that was sent to you in your letter looks like a very huge area. One of the main reasons that is the village's infrastructure is 60 years old. 60 years ago, when we started putting in water lines and our sewer lines, they need upgraded. And so one of the ways that we can start to upgrade these without having to raise your taxes or raise all these fees is by using some of this money that we hope to be generated from this TIF district to help us fix some of these problems. You all know that we need a new water tower. We're looking at over $2 million for a water tower. When we get a new water tower, we've got to redo a lot of our main water lines. That's a very expensive proposition. And so that's another reason why at this time we're looking at a TIF. So at this time, we'll take any comments or questions that anybody has. If you're online, try to unmute yourself, and I'll try to figure out who's talking, and we'll go from there. Just ask to unmute. So I'll open it up to any questions that anyone might have.
Hey, Fred.
And Anthony Shade, go ahead.
Hey, I had a question for the other guy that was just on. I missed his name. What was the EAB? What does that stand for?
Equalized assessed valuation. So basically for most types of property, you take the market value of your property, divide that by 3. And then if you subtract out any exemptions like a homestead exemption or senior exemption, that's the equalized assessed valuation. And then that is the value that is multiplied by the tax rate to determine how much property tax you pay. And so it's that value. If that value goes up, that's generally what causes your property taxes to increase each year, beyond just, an increase in the rate by a particular taxing body.
Okay, that sounds good. Yeah, I know how it works. I just didn't understand the acronym.
Anybody else have questions?
Public comment, okay?
Sure.
Okay. All right, Mr. Mayor, village board members, I'm David Tuttle, Fire Chief for Logan Civil Fire Protection District, and Assistant Chief Chris Mansky is with me tonight. I'm hopeful that you had time to read the written comment that was provided to each of you from the fire department, from our board. And we do thank you for allowing us to provide a very brief comment concerning the proposed TIF district for the village. We believe at this time that the TIF district as proposed will have a negative impact on our ability to provide services and take thousands of dollars out of the pocket of the fire department. This could last, as you said, up to 23 years. New property with new citizens, which we all hope for, will require fire and emergency medical services, but that property, as you know, will continue to be assessed at the 2020 levels. We would welcome a dialogue, and we look forward to that, between the village board and our fire department to discuss methods, if possible, to reduce the impact on our fire department and the services that we provide.
And I will say within the TIF Act, there is the authority to enter into intergovernmental agreements. So the village does have the ability to reimburse any taxing body for a portion of its capital costs that are made necessary by TIF projects. So that is an option going forward if there's some money that is created and there's a need there. So.
Does anyone else have any comments or would like to make any comments? Go ahead.
My name is Rebecca Seymour. I'm the director of the Farmington Public Library. And it was similar to his question. I was told that it's possible within that, it's like a small percentage that you could then do an intergovernmental agreement then with the school district or the library. Would we fall into that too?
Yeah, all affected taxing bodies can have an agreement there, and there's another mechanism. So there's 2 ways to get a taxing body money with TIF funds. One is to do an individual one-on-one agreement where, you say you need, say the fire department needs a new fire truck, and that fire truck is going to serve, some TIF property. We can generally reimburse for a portion or all of that using TIF funds because it's a capital expenditure. Same with the library district. Beyond that, there's and Farmington does this. They declare a certain amount of surplus funds. And so how that works is rather than you having a specific capital expenditure, the city just declares, a certain dollar amount of surplus, and then that money will be returned to the county, and then that county will distribute that money pro rata to all the taxing bodies. And that money can be used for any expense, not just capital expenditures, so salaries or overhead or whatever. So, yeah.
So where do we as a taxing body then say, hey, this is something that we're interested in having included in the TIF?
So that the ability to do that is going to be, it's in the TIF Act and it'll be in the plan. As far as specifically what the village is willing to do, that'd be between the village and the library, work that out. And if you have a concern or, you'd like to undertake that.
Something you do kind of separate from one of those steps that you were talking about.
Yeah, it is not establishment. It's just,
Okay.
you come to the village, say, these are our concerns, this is a need that we have, and then we negotiate that separately.
Okay.
I guess I'd be next. I'm Zach Sheridan. I'm the superintendent at the school. I shared with you some of my general overarching concerns. I'm not really ready to stand in opposition of it. I just wanted to share what our general concerns were and look forward to continued dialogue. Obviously, like any taxing body, we have apprehensions whenever a TIF is being discussed. We're like, oh no, well, you guys have needs like water and infrastructure and things like that. And then we have the needs, and then we'd have to raise our tax rates, and it gets real mucky with all that. And so I just appreciate you guys keeping us in the loop, inviting us, keeping that open dialogue as you develop those plans, because I'm sure you guys are in the same boat. When you look at our tax revenues coming in right now, and you look at what we brought in this year at this point versus what last year with the delay and the property tax and everything, you have real apprehensions in going down this road right now. But like I said before, I'm not ready to stand in opposition to it, but I welcome continued dialogue about it, because quite honestly, when I got here, the Farmington TIF was already established, and I've been since the day one, been involved in that and seen the growth and seen all the opportunities that's created for the community and such. So I struggle to stand in opposition from the get-go, but I do have some apprehensions. So with that, thank you.
I think one thing that we can say as we as a village board have discussed this, we are trying to model a lot of our plan after what Farmington did with theirs. So it's going to be fairly similar to what Farmington did. I think theirs have been in effect 7 years or so, something like that. And like you say, if you just drive through Farmington now, you see the difference of what Farmington was 7 years ago and what it is now. And a lot of that was due to them being able to establish a TIF district. All right, anybody on Zoom that would like to make a comment?
Hey, this is Christy Maskey. Hello, I'm on Phil Gold.
All
I
right.
just have a quick question in regards to Phil Gold and Joel Lynn, why that space is not included.
That space was not included because the infrastructure in there is not the 60-year-old infrastructure that is throughout the rest of the village.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then second, just one more question. There is new infrastructure that is highlighted, so I want to understand the difference between what's highlighted that's new infrastructure versus what is not. So I think on the edge of town here in Hannah City, we have the excavation business that's out there. So I know they're newer, so I just wonder why they would not be excluded as well.
Okay, the reason that they are not excluded is because there is no infrastructure out there for the village. The village does not have infrastructure out there. And with the growth of the village, with all of those properties annexing into the village, they were put into the TIF in case we need to run water lines, sewer lines out to those areas.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Anybody else have comments or questions? All right, hearing no more questions, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn our public meeting. Motion by Hoopengarner, Second by Weaver. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, same. Motion carried. Thank you all very much for joining us. If you have questions, this is an ongoing process. It will take several months to get this all worked out, but thank you for your input.
Byron,